A very warm welcome back, and thanks to everybody who's following this situation. Thank you to those who've commented and subscribed to get more updates. In this session, I'll be looking at the condition of blue tongue in more detail, as reported from a couple of news articles. So first, from Reuters, the highly respected news source channel that the media relies on for the accuracy and authenticity of its reporting. Equestrian governing body finds blue horse tongues in dressage review. This on August the 6th. The equestrian governing body, the FEI, in charge of the Olympic riding in Versailles, has found pictures of horses with blue tongues caused by oxygen shortage during dressage competition. The organisation, so this is the FEI's chief vet, told Reuters on Tuesday. So is this another instance of whistleblowing? It would appear to be. Horse welfare issues are under close scrutiny at the Olympics as the sport grapples with the fallout from an incident involving British star rider Charlotte Dujardin that revived ethical debates and fears about its Olympic future. 6 times Olympic medalist was provisionally suspended on July 27 after footage emerged showing her whipping a horse's legs multiple times during training. The FEI has reviewed pictures from Olympics dressage events taken by one of its photographers. FEI chief vet Goran Ackerstrom said, adding that some of the pictures taken at the Dressage Grand Prix last Tuesday showed scenes of harm to animals. So this is a veterinarian we are hearing from here, and this group has the last word on injury. The concern on those pictures were the blue tongues, likely caused by high rein tension. That means the rider's hand tension, potentially exerting a backward pull on the reins, Ackerstrom said, adding that the double bridles, which are mandatory in top-level dressage tournaments, also played a role in cutting off oxygen from the tongue, causing pain or unnecessary comfort. So there you have it. It's mandatory to use these bridles in top-level competition. Animal rights campaign groups such as PETA have criticised dressage riders for using double bridles. The FEI did not take any disciplinary measures, and the findings will not affect the dressage results. The body's vets notified the competition jury, which then summoned the concerned riders for a discussion on the issue, Ackerstrom said. Reeling from the Dujardin incident, the Switzerland-based FEI had pledged it would be uncompromising in ensuring animal welfare in Versailles. The photo review for the first time included a layer of special checks linked to horse welfare. So if you remember my earlier video, it reported that the FEI met immediately before the competition to ensure that welfare standards were upheld, and they employed a welfare officer to oversee the competition from within the arena. FEI officials had earlier sanctioned a Brazilian rider for a controversial neck hyperflexion and disqualified some horses with minor bleeding during the Olympics, which was from the tongue. So this is highlighting that what many have been saying all along is that the FEI is not upholding its own rules. Are they just window dressing by talking about this, meeting about this, and sending a welfare officer to monitor the situation, but in fact not entirely willing to uphold their welfare action? Or does this go deeper? I'm trying to find a reason why they wouldn't, why at face value they look almost powerless to stop the horse abuse. And if they are, then they need to change the rules about the tack. The next article, and this was published just before the start of the dressage phase at the Olympics. Danish Olympic riders face harsh criticism. Images reveal potential horse abuse. In the wake of the opening of the Olympic Games, sorry, I can't pronounce that word, but it looks like they are a monitoring organisation. In collaboration with photographer Crispin Parelius Johansen, now releases photos taken this year revealing Danish Olympic riders on horses in potentially extreme pain, according to several veterinarians and experts in the field. Based on the images, the Danish riders have now been reported for physical abuse. The Danish Equestrian Federation refuses to assess the images as they do not find the material sufficient. And this is astonishing. I see a horse with a clear wound on its tongue and what looks like bruises. Its mouth definitely needs to be examined further, says Finnish Kati Tuomala, veterinarian and PhD in bit-related injuries in competition horses at the University of Helsinki, as she clicks through the photo folder. Helsinki is in Finland, neighbouring country to Denmark. So this observer has a PhD in this topic, so she knows what she's talking about. After 5 pictures, I'm already starting to feel unwell. I've seen similar pictures before, but these still surprise me, she says over a phone connection from Finland. The photo material that Kati Tuomola is looking at is taken by an English-Norwegian photographer who has travelled to major European equestrian events this year to document how several horses in international competitions show signs of pain and so-called blue tongues. So the whistleblowers seem to be out there in numbers, but as usual, nobody's listening to them or nobody's acting on their evidence. The riders are named. The first 3 riders are representing Denmark at this year's Olympic Games in Paris. One withdrew after the Danish Federation received a video sequence from 2022, which led to an investigation from the Federation's disciplinary committee. So yes, riders are withdrawing due to abuse, but obviously not that many of them. According to Kruth, the video contains a clear mistake during a training session. A mistake. Do elite riders make mistakes? Well, I think they're so focused, they would have made most of their mistakes long before they got to elite level. The new photos, which are being shown to the public for the first time here in this media, are found to be problematic by Kati Tuomola, who was the PhD holder, and several other experts and veterinarians, indicating horses potentially in extreme pain. What we are seeing now is the consequence of high-resolution photos becoming available to science and to the public, says Paul McGreevy, author of several textbooks on animal behaviour and welfare, veterinarian and professor at Sydney School of Veterinary Science. So these experts are not making this stuff up, and we have photographic evidence. So here, behind the vertical, a staring eye and blue tongue. One of several signs of discomfort or pain for the horses in the pictures is the presence of blue tongues, explains New Zealand's David J. Mellor, PhD, Professor Emeritus in Animal Welfare Science and Bioethics at Massey University. He assesses that the blue tongues in varying degrees are present in the pictures of all 4 horses. So are the FEI officials more qualified to decide whether or not these horses are being abused? What is going on here? Without the use of a bit and tight noseband, a horse's tongue would be the same natural pink colour as the gums around it, and therefore the presence of a blue tongue, according to the Professor Emeritus, is a clear indication that something is seriously wrong in the horse's mouth. Again, blue tongue. The dark or blue colour occurs when the tongue is pressed too hard by the bit in the horse's mouth, which reduces blood flow from the bit's placement to the tip of the tongue, explains David J. Mellor. The blue tongue is a genuine concern due to the clearly reduced oxygen supply, which means reduced blood flow and very likely causes ischemic pain, which is pain due to blocked arteries. He says, describing the tongue on this rider's horse, as dark blue. Some in the sport try to dismiss that the pinching of the blood supply is linked to pain. But regardless of whether the blue tongue is associated with pain or not, the position of the bit on the tongue alone, with the bridle and the pressure applied to the tongue, in itself causes extreme pain to the horse. So something needs to be dropped from competition here, although I would say it's the rider's hands that is causing the blue tongue, which is facilitated by the bits. According to veterinarian Katie Tuomola, this horse also has a very dark coloured tongue, but it is only one out of several indications of whether a horse feels discomfort or pain, she explains. The horse's head is also behind the vertical axis in several pictures, which is against international rules in the sport. The mouth is open to relieve the pain. The eyes are staring intensely, and there are wrinkles and tension around the lips, she says. Asking a question, do you know for sure that the horse is in pain? The degree of pain is difficult to quantify. I don't know if it's 3 or 10 on a scale from 1 to 10. Where is the line between discomfort, mild pain, and pain? It is definitely a negative experience for the horse, she says, referring to her new research in the field. And if you click on the link, you'll be able to see that. Is rein tension associated with horse behaviour and mouth injuries in harness racing trotters? A pilot study. And this was just published August 2024. According to the experts that this publication has spoken with, an overall assessment of the horse's expressions should be used to evaluate their welfare. And here the mouth is one of the most obvious indications of whether something is wrong, as horses with open mouths try to relieve pain or discomfort. All the horses have open mouths caused by the bit, which is not seen in horses in motion without a bit, unless they are neighing or calling in some other way, says David J. Mellor. Another blue tongue. The Danish Union refuses to assess the images. So it would seem that these have greater expertise than the experts. The publication has asked the Danish Equestrian Federation's board for a professional assessment and statement on what they see in the pictures of the 4 Danish riders. The Federation refuses to provide one, and I'll just state here that many of these equestrian boards have veterinarians as their advisors. So why are they not even going to have a look at these images? In an email response, they write, When we assess whether a horse's well-being is challenged, it is important that we have a comprehensive assessment basis. Photos express a snapshot of a situation without a coherent context. Well, there is a coherent context. The horse's tongue is blue, and a whole range of experts have commented on this condition. Therefore, still photos can rarely stand alone, and therefore we cannot provide a professional assessment on the existing basis. The submitted photos all come from international FEI competitions in 2024. The competitions are held in a very professional setup where the competition grounds are monitored by professional stewards. Well, how knowledgeable and competent are they? And competitions are judged by professional and competent judges. In cases where horses in competition at FEI events show persistent conflict behaviour, the judges have an important responsibility to judge and possibly sanction the rider. Okay, blaming the judge, but maybe they're not judging for the condition of the horse's mouth. I will be looking at that to see what they actually are awarding marks for. In the submitted cases, no Danish riders have been sanctioned by the judges at the respective FEI events, and we have not received any reports in the Equestrian Federation. Furthermore, it is important to emphasise that FEI events are public with many spectators, TV coverage, press photographers and veterinary checks of the horses, both before and after the competitions. Possibly, but I need to check whether photography has been banned from the warm-up areas. I seem to recall a story several years ago that it was. They deny it as a problem. One of the people who has closely followed the development of horse welfare in the sport over the past decades is Australian Christina Wilkins, who has been the editor of the media Horses and People magazine since 2009. This spring, the Swedish media Aftonbladet, in collaboration with Crispin Perelius Johannesson, who, as you recall from earlier, is the photographer in this article, published several pictures of horses with blue tongues, such as the Swedish rider Patrick Kittle's horse. Before the pictures of the blue tongue, not many in the sport were aware of the problem, tells Christina Wilkins. Well, to be fair, the rider may not be fully aware of the horse's blue tongue because they are seated behind the horse's head and behind the horse's mouth. So they would be relying from someone on the ground to tell them about this. Now that we can see blue tongues occur among many horses, it is almost everywhere, she says. Oh, is it? Mentioning that she has access to several of Perelius Johansson's photo folders of other top riders and their horses. In response to the very visual blue tongues, several riders, according to Christina Wilkins, have started tightening the noseband more, making it harder for the horse to open the mouth and show the tongue. Ah, well, I thought that was for greater control of the horse or restraint of the horse, but it now seems that they don't want us looking in the horse's mouth. Additionally, several riders are still using a product called sugar paste, which foams up in the horse's mouth and on the lips, making it difficult for judges and others to see the colour of the tongue, Christina Wilkins believes. The product was prohibited by the FEI effective from January 2022. Well, how can they tell whether a small amount is being applied or not? How can they tell? Another question, how do elite athletes, judges and officials receive photos of the blue tongues now being shown among riders? I think they are in a bit of a bind. I don't know what else they can do other than try to hide these blue tongues from the public. They deny it as a problem. I know that Crispin has been wrongly accused of manipulating photos, so I don't think they want to receive it. They will deny it and try to shut it down. Why? Because they don't have a solution right now. It will take 6 or 7 years to train a new horse to Grand Prix levels without pressure in the mouth. So it is an existential risk for the sport as it is now, says Christina Wilkins. I don't entirely agree that it would take 6 or 7 years. Horses learn a lot faster than that. This is particularly horrible. And yeah, I can see how photos can be manipulated because I do a lot of editing myself and often change the brightness, contrast, hue, and color saturation of photos. But this has not been manipulated up to the max at all. But we can see this is pink, this is not pink. For the Australian veterinarian Paul McGreevy, all the pictures of the 4 horses show deformed, discoloured tongues and some lack of muscle tone as well as open mouths. Yeah, because if these tongues are injured and re-injured over time, the same as any muscle, that may change the muscle tone of the tongue and the position in the horse's mouth. According to his studies, this reflects the bits used by elite dressage riders, which is authorized by the FEI. To understand his explanation, one must know the mechanics of the bit and its potential to compress soft tissues in the mouth. At the elite level, dressage horses have a double bridle in their mouths, which consists of a metal bar, a so-called bradoon bit, at the top of the mouth, and further down a curb bit, which work in conjunction with a so-called curb chain, consisting of leather and metal, which is placed under the horse's lower jaw and muscle. So there are several sites of pressure here under the jaw, which is basically skin over bone, no tissue underneath it, and 2 points of pressure on the horse's tongue and the corner of the lips, and also the roof of the mouth and the bars of the mouth. So how are these horses expressing their gait as harmonious with that much distracting pressure in their mouths? And is it the use of the bits and the rider's hands that is producing this movement whereby the horse's back movement is restricted and the horse exaggerates use of the legs? I will be making a video about that. The curb bits convert rein tension to both direct and amplified indirect pressure forces on the tongue. It is very important to understand how much amplified force can transfer from the rider's hands to the horse's mouth through a curb bit when the rider pulls the reins, says Paul McGreevy. So just to remind you of this pressure is accentuated by lever forces from the horse's mouth to the rider's hands. And also think of the horse moving and how, if they are going to avoid pain, they would keep their heads as still as possible. Therefore, that could also be contributing to the leg exaggerated movement. It is also important to understand that the misuse of curb bits depends to some extent on the simultaneous use of tight nosebands. Nosebands that clamp the jaws tightly together have 3 effects. Riders avoid penalty points if the horse opens its mouth. The blue tongues as symptoms of pain go unnoticed, and the aversive impact of the bits on the horse's mouth is amplified because there is no wriggle room. Our studies have shown that in combination with bits, These nosebands deny the horse essential comfort behaviours such as chewing and, most worrying of all, swallowing, says the Australian veterinarian. Even this frame, this horse is behind the vertical. There should be instant elimination, or perhaps elimination on the third repetition of seeing it. Again, dubious saddle fit here. In humans, organs that do not receive blood flow are associated with pain. This is called ischemic pain, reduced blood flow, and is due to tissue hypoxia and acidosis, which in itself leads to necrosis if it is sustained. But there are no studies of ischemia in horses yet, probably because animal ethics committees would refuse researchers to conduct such studies in the light of what is known about ischemic pain in humans, Paul McGreevy explains. And yeah, what Professor McGreevy is alluding to is that you cannot run experiments where you cause pain to a horse just to see what the outcome is. And when researchers assess pain in animals, they use a precautionary principle which says that what would cause a human pain will also cause an animal pain. Similarly, we should expect that sustained pressure on the tongue not only causes ischemic pain, but also numbness and eventually necrosis, which is what I just stated, which is dead tissue, typically requiring amputation. I don't like this headpiece either. It looks to be digging into the horse's ears, potentially because the horse is behind the vertical. But just look at how much pressure there is that can be caused by the bridle and the bit. More pressure here. And the guidelines is to fit the noseband 2 or 3 fingers below this point here. But of course, that doesn't seem plausible when you have all this metalwork going on. Yeah, blue tongue. And this curb chain is covered by leather. So this tells me that this horse potentially is very, very sensitive to any pressure on the curb. And I know this because I had a horse like that myself. It has happened several times. This publication has also presented the photo material to the Swedish veterinarian Annette Graf, who has nearly 30 years of experience in equine practice and is vice president of the European Equine Veterinary Association. Overall, she assesses that the pictures show sign of horses that have not been trained properly. Indeed. These are top riders. It should be the creme de la creme, showcasing the most well-trained horses and correct riding. But unfortunately, it is not good animal welfare here, she says. Well, I'm also of the opinion that these horses have been so highly bred for their extravagant gait expression, their potential athleticism, that riders can no longer sit to without restraining some aspects of that movement, which to me looks like the back movement in many cases. For Nana Skodborg Merrild's horse, Don Olympio, the Swedish veterinarian assesses, in addition to the mentioned signs of pain, that the horse's neck is also bent too much, hyperflexed, which is not allowed according to international FEI rules. The point behind the ears, the poll, should be the highest point on a horse in a correct frame. I'll just correct that to healthy, non-injurious frame. Here you see that it is the third plait on the horse's mane that is the highest point. This corresponds to the third or fourth vertebra, but it should be the back of the skull and the first cervical vertebra that is the highest point. The nose on this horse should be much further forward and the neck should be straightened, she says. Can the pictures be individual stills that do not reflect reality? That is what the defenders of this riding will say. I know that Crispin has thousands of pictures of the different horses, shot from different angles and from both sides of the horse, and the short neck is consistent in several sequences. So at least it has happened several times during this competition, says Annette Graf. I mean, this just to me looks like instant elimination. As this veterinarian just said, there would normally be a plat there, but the horse has been clipped. 1, 2, 3, and potentially 4. So the highest point of the horse's neck here looks to me, if we look at the arc of the nuchal ligament, it's here. It's behind the jaw line instead of the atlantoaxial region, which is the pole, being more elevated. But again, the riders may not see this, although they can see the plats. They perhaps should or could place a marker here on the pole plat, and then they can see if it disappears from view. So none of this is rocket science. And although they say it will take 7 years to change the training so that the horse does not need a double bridle, I would say get these riders out for 6 or 7 years and let the riders come through to compete that are not using this form of restraint. And we can see the competition change almost overnight. Let's move the cheese, as they say. The International Equestrian Federation wants to avoid blue tongues. The publication has asked the International Olympic Committee whether they consider blue tongues to be a problem during the Olympics, and if so, how they will sanction against it. In an email response, the IOC stated that animal welfare is of the utmost importance, but that the rules and control of equestrian sports during the Olympic Games are maintained by the International Equestrian Federation. Well, yeah, you can't expect the Olympic Committee to adopt the role of policing the FEI rules. They understandably delegate that responsibility to the organisation presenting the horses to the Olympics in competition. The publication has also contacted the FEI to inquire about how they will handle and enforce the occurrence of blue tongues and how they view the images of blue tongues that are now being shared. To this, the FEI responded. The FEI has taken several steps to try and avoid blue tongues. Okay. Not a very well worded response. It sounds rather lame and ineffective to me, because it's the riders causing the blue tongues, not necessarily the bits, although it is their dressage tests which facilitate this rider behaviour. The FEI Veterinary Committee and department has been closely examining the topic of horse oral cavity anatomy and physiology, considering factors such as rein tension, the rider's seat and leg pressure, and saddle design. Ooh. Given the complexity of the issue, well, it's not complex to the experts previously mentioned in this article. The FEI is considering a detailed study to understand how to prevent blue tongues in the future. Okay. I'm curious about the methodology for that. The FEI is already in discussion with a biomechanics scientist to address this matter. Well, biomechanics is not the study of physiology. But it'll be interesting if that report ever sees the light of day. The FEI is advising all athletes in all disciplines at the Olympic Games in Paris 2024 to pay close attention to the fitting of their tack, especially bits, nosebands, and curb chains. They should also avoid using excessive rein pressure. Well, it'll all be over with for some of them if they take the pressure off the reins and the bit. If some of them are operating the bits with enough force to cause a blue tongue. And by following this advice, we aim to improve the contact between the rider and the horse. Yeah, you may well improve the contact, but how will the judges know that these riders are easing off on the contact and that they should be marked accordingly? The FEI also states that their judges during the Olympics will ensure that there are at all times should be a soft and steady connection between the horse's mouth and the rider's hands. Yeah, how are they making it look like a soft and steady connection with two sets of reins, two bits, a curb? Is this about the head being on the vertical and the pole being the highest point of the head and neck carriage? Yes, in the main. FEI has not been presented with the photographic material from the Danish riders and therefore has not had the opportunity to comment on the photos. Well, if you recall from the article that I've just read, they saw photographs from the competition and with input from their own veterinarian, and it would appear that they have denied that there is a problem. So this horse, we can make a comparison in this gait, whatever it is, and it may be a flying change as the rider's leg is so far back, or it may be in lateral movement. So it would appear to be somewhat correct. And also the curb bit is at a 45-degree angle. So the horse doesn't look as uncomfortable. So we see a much softer eye compared with earlier photographs. The mouth is open. Why is the mouth open? Is the horse trying to create space, possibly to loosen the tension on the curb chain? These are the lines of inquiry that I would be making in any study. In pictures of the horse above, veterinarians assess that in addition to a very open and signs of conflict behaviour, that there also is a clear wound on the horse's tongue. According to Kati Tuomola, the wound may be related to the tooth called the canine tooth. Naturally, horses do not have wounds there, but tight nosebands can somehow lead the tongue to be compressed against the canine tooth. I would very much like to examine this horse's mouth. You can clearly see the chronic wound on the tongue and a bit above it. I think there is a bruise, says Katie Tuomola. It's strange how there is a white area around the wound. It means there is no blood flow. It might be a scar. The wound has rounded edges and there is no bleeding, so it is probably old and chronic. It may have been damaged several times. Question, are you sure it's a wound? It can only be. It can't be anything else. I can see it's over the stallion tooth, which mares occasionally have canine teeth also. So there must be something causing it to do so. The horse needs to be examined, says Katie, who assesses that it would be easy to spot the wound by looking into the horse's mouth for 1 to 2 minutes. And here we can see how the canine tooth can cause a wound. The Swedish veterinarian Annette Graf also assesses that the dark area in the picture of this horse is an old and chronic wound, meaning it has not happened during the competition in Germany. Now, I have a video on scar tissue because I have a focus on this, especially castration scar tissue, when I'm treating a horse. And Anyone who has scar tissue will know that it can be very uncomfortable to the touch. So for horses with scars in their mouths, they can be uncomfortable even with the lightest of pressure or contact from the bit. Should a horse compete with such a wound? It's up to officials to decide whether to compete or not, but they are supposed to look for wounds in the mouth before the competition. And whether this wound on the tongue is enough for the horse not to compete is hard to say. I personally don't think it should compete with that wound because it is not normal for a wound to be there, says Annette Graf, emphasising that she's not a judge, but it is to her professional opinion as a veterinarian that speaks. Well, I would say the horse needs a bit, not necessarily 2 bits, but a bit or bitless bridle to avoid contact with that scar so that the horse's dressage career and its rider does not necessarily end because of a mouth wound, but that use of the tack needs to be modified. None of this is rocket science. It's what we do as therapists to come up with a solution under such circumstances. Yeah, I mean, I've seen riders use their legs in this position for flying changes or tempi changes, where in canter they change from one leading leg to the other. And again, the pole is the highest point on the head and neck. The Danish Federation finds horse welfare incredibly important. As mentioned, the board of the Danish Equestrian Federation does not believe there is a basis for a professional assessment based on the photo material they have received. The board members have received a total of 40 pictures of the 4 horses. In an email to this publication, they write, "It is important to emphasise that for the DRF, horse welfare is incredibly important for the legitimacy of equestrian sports, and it must be taken seriously. Therefore, we work every day to ensure the best possible conditions for horses in equestrian sports to thrive and show acceptance in both training and competition situations." Well, yes, they do. And I think the problem here is abusive riders. They know when their rein tension is tight. They know that when the horse feels soft in their hand, that is not accompanied by hard hands. And when on social media we are discussing correct movement of dressage horses, we need to be making that focus entirely on comfortable movement for the horse. The board then lists a number of initiatives that have been implemented in recent years. This includes an increase in inspections of horses at competitions here, at home, and a research project with a university which aims to develop further knowledge about horse behaviour markers, as well as increase the ability of riders, trainers, judges, and other officials to interpret and understand the horses' languages. Well, we do have a ridden horse ethogram, which enables us to determine whether the horse is uncomfortable or not. The problem is we don't know how uncomfortable, but there is still clear indicators between a horse that is uncomfortable and a horse that is not, whether that's momentarily or not. But yes, we do need more investigations on the topic. Finally, the board writes, DRF's Olympic team riders are the strongest ambassadors of equestrian sports. DRF has full confidence that the riders and their trainers will fulfill their great responsibility to deliver world-class equestrian performances, while also being role models for the younger generations in the sport. Well, that may be their aim and intention, but we're not seeing that as the outcome here. So much more needs to be done. And I really do think a change of tack and potentially the use of the voice, or allowing the use of the voice in the competition, and ensuring that horses do not work behind the vertical, is the way to eliminate these issues. Or just allow ethical riders with ethical tack to compete, because the judges know what healthy movement is, or they certainly should. Another blue tongue retracted further back in the horse's mouth, and we have a more horizontal curb bit, and the more horizontal it is, the more pressure there is on the curb chain and the more pressure on the horse's jaw bone directly beneath the skin. The pictures taken of the horse above received several of the same critical assessments as her national teammates' horses. The photo material has also been presented to the Belgian veterinarian Eva van Avermaet, founder of the horse welfare organisation Collectif pour les Chevaux. Although she had seen similar pictures before, the material of the picture of the above horse still shocks her. The horse's tongue is pulled up and bluish, the mouth is wide open, the noseband is digging into the underlying tissue and crushing the inside of the cheek against the molars. The horse has an intense stare and the neck is hyperflexed. This is all very painful for the horse, says Eva van Avermaet. Now, I wonder, let's play devil's advocate here. Maybe these riders are unaware of the extent of the pain that they are inflicting on their horses because they cannot see it, although they can feel behind the vertical, and presumably they are over tightening the horse's nosebands. Maybe they need more awareness of what they are doing. According to the international rules and regulations from the FEI, including Article 142, it is considered horse abuse to do anything that causes them pain. It is also considered abuse if one does something that is likely to cause the horse unnecessary discomfort. There is no rule under the FEI that directly mentions blue tongues, but according to Eva van Avermaet, all the pictures should invoke Article 142. So the FEI has at least one veterinarian advising them, but based on that information, it's not the veterinarian's role to advise of the way forward. That's the domain of their committee and other advisors. This sentiment is shared by Paul McGreevy, who, upon seeing the images this publication provided for his comment, has reported a protest to the Secretary General of the FEI, Sabrina Ibanez. He noted that the FEI rules clearly stipulate that any person witnessing an action or omission which is likely to cause pain to a horse must report it immediately. Yeah, okay, must report it, but to the FEI, who has apparently denied the issue of blue tongue at the Olympics, because let's face it, it is rather an embarrassment, and it may not be possible to take away the offender's medal. But then this all may be about not being able to see blue tongue at the time. I think the whole test needs to be run in slow motion before the marks are awarded. There's something very, very wrong here, that they cannot pick up what's happening. These images would compel any veterinarian to take such action, says Paul McGreevy. Open mouths on dressage or horses should be sanctioned according to the FEI, but it rarely happens, says the 5 veterinarians that this publication has spoken with. As the Danish Equestrian Federation also mentions in their response, none of the 4 Danish riders were sanctioned at the respective events. even though all horses in several of the pictures have open mouths. Yeah, to be fair, what the judges are judging happens quite quickly, and they do have to look at the whole horse and rider and then come up with a mark promptly. So perhaps that is what is wrong about the judging, where they should be able to perhaps ask for a replay before a final mark is given. But hey, you've got multiple judges there. So what is the answer to this? The judges are not necessarily there to look for abuse. They are there to mark the movement and how far it deviates from the standard. So they still have to give a mark whether the horse is abused or not. But I felt for this Olympics, having watched the eventing dressage, I felt that overall, except for in one or two cases, the marking reflected that. For a net graph, this indicates that in the future there should be a separate judge solely to look at the harmony of the horse and the horse's overall behaviours, for sure. And this may well need multiple judges around the arena. It doesn't have to be a judge. It could also be a veterinarian or behaviour specialist, someone trained to look for these parameters in the horse, says Annette Graf. Should video be used to review slow motion sequences? I have said this. I think that will be the future. We see it in all other sports as recently as in the European Championship in football, where cameras showed offside. Why not use it in equestrian sports? Well, it's used in eventing in the cross-country phase. The publication has asked how FEI view the photos of riders competing on horses with blue tongues that has previously been photographed this year. In accordance with that, the FEI writes that dressage is to be judged live at the competition. As a general point, it is important to note that dressage is a sport that is judged live and not by freeze frame, video replay or photographic review. If during the test that a performance is against the welfare of the horse and or shows abusive riding, the judges can eliminate the athlete immediately, the FEI writes. Well, I wonder when the last time that happened. The riders have not responded to the criticism. The publication has tried to contact the 4 Danish riders to hear how they respond to the pictures and the signs of pain and discomfort pointed out by the veterinarians. None of the riders have responded. Instead, the director of the Danish Equestrian Federation, Morten Schram-Rodtwit, has contacted the editorial team on behalf of the athletes. He writes in an email that 3 of the riders are fully focused on the competitions in Paris, and he therefore hopes for an understanding that they will not respond at this time. He also mentioned, like the Federation's board, that the images do not form the basis for a professional assessment. Oh, really? Then how come so many professionals have been able to assess those photographs? In relation to the submitted images, it is our clear assessment that the basis for making a professional technical riding and veterinary assessment needs to be stronger and not merely express a few seconds of situations out of a programme that lasts 6 to 7 minutes, writes Morten Schram-Rodtwit. During the Olympics, only Nadia Abo-Sloth rides the horse whose pictures are presented here. Catherine Laudrup Dufour rides Mount St. John Freestyle, and Nana Skodberg Merrild rides Blue Horse Zepter. The system needs to be restarted. With the Olympic flame burning in the background, the world's elite in equestrian sports began the first competitions at the Château de Versailles this weekend. According to Paul McGreevy, there will be extra attention on the riders and their horses' well-being at the French Palace during the Olympic Games. I foresee that At the Olympic Games, more cosmetic white material, sugar paste, will be applied to the horse's lips, and the nosebands will be tightened because the world's eyes will be on the colour and shape of the tongues, he says. According to veterinarians, the responsibility for the horse's welfare should be placed on the riders, the FEI, and the national federations, although I believe the primary responsibility lies with the rider as they ride and care for the horse. It goes hand in hand, because if the FEI rewards bad practices or does not sanction against them, then the riders will not change anything, says Katia Tuamola. Belgian veterinarian Eva van Avermaet fully agrees with her colleague on this. These pictures are very strong and important documentation of a system where horse abuse is normalised and rewarded. It has been going on for years because the FEI system to protect horses against abuse is not working, she says. According to the veterinarians and experts, more than Olympic medals is at stake at the historic Chateau de Versailles. A yellow warning card has already been issued retrospectively to Brazilian rider Carlos Parro after the animal welfare organisation PETA criticised the rider based on 2 photos from the warm-up arena where the horse's neck was hyperflexed. Regardless of what sanctions are given during the Olympics, it will not be enough to secure the future of equestrian sport, says Swedish Annette Graf. According to her, fundamental changes in attitudes towards horses as sentient beings are needed. The system needs to be restarted. There are many good riders and horses out there, and I strongly believe it is possible to use horses in sport and still maintaining good horse welfare. But it has taken the wrong turn. If I could press Control, Alt, Delete, that would be the best thing to do. Well, we can't, but it would appear that it's not possible under the current rules to monitor and sanction for horse abuse at FEI run competitions. It's just not possible.